Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are, because it is really good to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is the continuation of Baltimore. Yeah, okay. So, what I really decided I need to do is I need to talk about the game a little bit, and as it's presenting itself to me. The game is connecting the ancient religions to the population reset through the false narratives of history, religion, and science that they presented to us. Right? That's the game. And this issue of the Baltimore Sun, Monday morning, September 10th, 1906, has me playing the game in circles. There's so much information, I cannot get a jump on the actual Baltimore Jubilee itself, which started this day. Right? And so I figured, yes, because the way the connections are coming in, let's back it up a little bit and see what else we can find. The first connection that I made and the first stalling of the Baltimore Jubilee of 1906 was an observation I made about the formatting of the Baltimore Sun and how, there's nothing coincidental about the format. I mean, there's significance here because there are subliminal aspects at play in the formatting of the Sun, right? We got the 8 columns broken into 2 halves, left and right. All right, 4 on the right and 4 on the left. And now this is important because as a newspaper, you are the front line of the indoctrination program, right, of our controllers, right? Because there's no television or newspaper, because there's no television or radio yet, right? And where do you get your news? You get it from the newspaper. And there are 2 different types of readers in the world. There are those who read from left to right, and those who read from right to left. And so that's not a coincidence. The type of information that they put out on their paper, for the first thing, because reading the paper in and of itself is a ritual act, especially old papers like this where they come folded in half and you get the newspaper and the first act is unfolding it lengthwise, and depending on how you're conditioned to read or you're conditioned to that newspaper, your eyes are going to go to certain places first on the first page of the paper. Right? And so if you're a reader who reads from left to right, the first thing you're seeing all the time in the Baltimore Sun is your commercialism and your consumerism, right? And this is catering to your new populations, all your immigrants and your Western Europeans and your Christians, because they're the people that read left to right. And then the people who would read from right to left would be people who were schooled in older traditions, Hebrew and so forth. And I wanted to look up, because I want to tie this a bit further, were there other languages that went from right to left? And they talk about the Hebrew and Arabic languages. They use these alphabets, right? And Persian and so forth. But this is what I wanted to find. And I'm glad I did, was ancient Indo-Aryan language, Binti, which I'm not going to look up right now. But ancient Egyptian, Etruscan, Greek, and the oldest Latin could be written in both directions. And now that's what I'm talking about. All right, trying to tie in the ancient religions, more so than just the Hebrew, which is very important, but even other languages. And if you want to tie these old religions through to the modern day, how did they do that? But through the mystery schools, which are represented today by all the Masonic organizations. All right, and if you want that represented in your newspaper, there are ways to do that as well. Because if you are familiar with any Freemasonry at all and everything, you know about the rule of reversal. And so in the newspaper sense, that would be what's back is front. And so the back page would hold all your real useful information of the day. So I thought that was really kind of a very interesting connection to make, especially when thinking that, some of these crown bloodlines, the potential for them to be not necessarily immortal, but long-lived is there. And we're going to touch on that as I go further into Baltimore. And so I thought that was interesting, making the connections between the format and potential readership. And again, I'm going to get a little closer in on it now. The left half, being all your consumerism. And again, trying to make ties to the old world, having Roman numerals right at the top helps, and that's 139. I'm not sure the significance of the issue number and volume numbers, how they work that out yet. It can't be based on the date if they go from a January, like if it's an annual edition, right? Because September 10th would be the 253rd day of the year. Anyway, so you're coming in from left to right with all your ads, right? And every one of these, like this Scott store is an ad is an episode in and of itself. I love that ad so much, right? But what it does is it gets you conditioned to your entertainment as well. And of course, that's important because there's nothing for you at home. Home is where you eat and sleep and make little people. And that's what home is. And I think it's amazing the connections that I'm going to be making just through this Monday issue of the Monday, September 10th issue of The Sun to that, because you think about it, they had built these big buildings with apartments, with these giant walk-ups that were never really at the beginning not outfitted with plumbing and bathrooms and things like this, yet like 10 families were living in them. You didn't want your people staying in their homes. You wanted them out and taking in and either being a consumer by buying stuff or being the entertained, with all of your entertainments. And now, when I mentioned Creatore and his band and how he's here all week, Mary and I had a conversation about this, how there were so many amusement parks back then, and inside the city limits and right in the county. What was the purpose of these amusement parks? Well, of course, they were part of the indoctrination program too. Because what you're doing is you're trying to imprint things on your populations before you ship them out abroad, and by that I'm meaning settling the West. And you have big numbers coming into your cities, and you give them these things, you imprint this stuff on them, and then you move them out of the cities. And so, and just right here in this little section of the paper here, there's 4 parks. Right? We have Riverview Park, which is an amusement park that has an admission of $0.10, right, to see Creatore. And then you have Electric Park, which I talked about, which has a carousel and other electric lights. It has a Nickelodeon, moving picture shows and things like this. It's where the home product exposition is. Right? We have Bayshore Park with its saltwater bathing and roller coasters and another carousel. Right? And there's dancing. All right? You have Gwyn Oak Park, which has another electric carousel. All of these amusement parks and their electric carousels. And again, I was thinking about the carousel is a sort of amazing thing. And it connects these parks, right? Because that would be a major attraction, right? If they're putting one everywhere. They expect everyone to ride the carousel. So what's the carousel? And, it's a merry-go-round or roundabout, depending. Merry-go-round is how I grew up calling them, right? And they either had seats or wooden horses, and later on they developed mechanics to raise the horses up and down, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it was always accompanied by looping circus music. And they also had other mythological creatures such as dragons and unicorns, which ties into the ancient religions, right? And the Celtic and things like this, which was going to be playing a major part in Baltimore down the line, right? And so the early history, the early history is that it was a machine to help train the knights who were going off to fight in the Crusades. Right? It was a round mechanism. They would march in circles and ride in circles and throw things back and forth at each other, right? As part of training. And that's what a carousel gets its start as. And it developed through the Renaissance to include elements of jousting. And again, no coincidence that state sport in Maryland is jousting. That's really amazing. But in the modern era, it's kind of developed in the 19th century, in the mid-1800s, and it becomes popularized after the first exhibitions come around. The one in London at the Crystal Palace, the carousel is showcased there, right? And so they would be built with these huge steam engines that would spin them around, and the steam engines would be connected to a calliope, which would run a loop of that circus-themed music. And now the calliope brings me back to like Creatore and his band, and my initial thought of that. The first time I saw this ad and the font of it, made me think of traveling minstrel shows and traveling carnivals, breezing into town a la Something Wicked This Way Comes, and the sort of mystical thing that would weave its web over the citizenry and then move out again. And it's kind of what was happening with these amusement parks, right, and their carousels. And so I thought that was interesting. I thought I would bring up a little calliope music. Right? I mean, that's that's the sound of old-timey amusement parks and carousels, isn't it? And it's interesting. So I was like, what else? So what else is there to be learned about the calliope, right? And so here's the calliope, right? And, you know, it's on wheels, right? And it's a giant steam-powered pipe organ. And later on, other gases were used, to compressed air and so forth later on. But, yeah, so there it is. It's a traveling pipe organ. Right? And it says a calliope is typically very loud. Even some small calliopes are audible for miles. And so, you know, that thinking about that, you know, this thing would be coming in from out of town and you could hear it coming from miles away. It would build excitement in the community, right? And, you know, once you had the ability to sort of create that excitement within your city limits, because now you got mass immigration coming in, right? So you've set it up with these traveling ones, and then you get your massive influx of people, and you set up your amusement parks. And so I was thinking about, like, that sound, you would hear that sound. And so when you sort of capture this, and you take this and you put it onto the carousel, it creates a beacon for your amusement park. It's something that can be heard from all around, right? And that made me think about what else calliope is. Right? You know, calliope is, you know, she's a Greek muse. And not only is she a muse, she's the muse. I mean, her voice, ecstatic harmony. Ecstatic harmony. Well, maybe not ecstatic harmony, but this could be used as sort of like a Pied Pipery kind of situation. And that's, like I said, tying it back to the calliope on wheels and the traveling shows, right? And so when you have these populations, you need to attract them and indoctrinate them to things, right? And so you have these amusements, and you put your product expositions in these parks, right? And because you're going to get ready to ship these people out, and other waves of immigration out into the suburbs and beyond, you know, westward expansion and so forth, right? But I wanted to look at, like, the population then versus now, right? And today, or this is in 2017, there's 600,000 people roughly in Baltimore. I think it's interesting that its nationwide rank is 30. And I would love just the idea of it, that it's so close that Baltimore could be 33rd. I mean, it just, that I love that idea so much. But through the history of the population, 1910, they had 500, this is roughly 558,000, right? And in 1900, you know, you split the difference here, you got 525,000, roughly, right? So less people than today, that they're drawing thousands of people. This is what they want us to believe, that they're drawing thousands of people to these amusement parks and carnivals, you know, on a daily basis. That's the way these are. And going forward, that's what I'm going to show, right? And so you lure them in with these calliope sounds and stuff like that. But the numbers just are crazy, because today it's 600,000, then it's like 500 and a quarter. And Mary sent me this amazing picture. All right, this is of 1916, I think, Baltimore. Look at this. All of these people here. And this is what they're trying to convince us was happening in these cities. And if it was, if this image is even remotely copacetic, then, you know, what was the reason for it? And of course, it's the indoctrination, right? But you just look at this, right? 500,000 people in Baltimore at the time. There's just over that there today. You could not do this today in Baltimore. What is the occasion? What's happening here, getting all these people in? And if you look, I mean, you're sardining these people in. What if they have to go to the bathroom? Like, what if you're this guy and you got to go to the bathroom? They have no idea what's going on here. And you can tell that, and you know this picture was doctored, because there was nothing but electric cable everywhere for the electric cable cars, for all the telegraphs and things like this, right? And so, you know, this is how, I can't imagine whatever event this was, right? And so just closing this up and tying it in to the amusement parks and the carousels and drawing them in, because once they get all of this done, why are there no amusement parks today? That's the thing. If the same amount of population is there, why can't these amusement parks be there today within the city or in the county limits? Because their purpose has been served. They were the meeting grounds and the exposition centers for all of this stuff that they wanted to imprint on the immigrant populations before they moved them west. All right, and then they were turned into the commercial cash cows that are amusement parks today. Busch Gardens, Disney World, so on and so forth. Located on the outskirts of town, and they became destination spots. But they're part of our public subconscious, because they've been there forever. Right? But now their use is different. They don't need them in the cities anymore. And so I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. Try not to put too much information in it, but this is the way it's been going. And every little thing is another little detail that connects to the Jubilee and back to the ancient religions. And so episodes like this, even though this took me 3 days to do, I'm just still so excited about the material going forward. And I can't wait to share it with you guys. And so I'm going to leave you guys a little calliope music. I hope you enjoyed this one. And until the next one, cheers. Okay, so just some quick thoughts. I had this thought about the carousel. I just didn't make it into the episode. It would have had more impact if it had. But that is that anytime you ride a modern carousel, you are essentially participating in the ritual reenactment of the training of the Knights of the Crusades. I think that was kind of cool. And there was one thought I had also in the Meat City episode that didn't make it into the episode itself. And that's that the name comes from the head of the marsh or head of the bog. And though I'm sure they didn't quite have this in mind, meaning an actual personification, but perhaps more geological sense. But when I read that, I couldn't help but think about these guys. He looks like he lives in a bog. Or cousin him, they look like they're bog creatures. Could they be the head of the bog? I don't know. So anyway, I just wanted to get those two thoughts out there. And so until the next one, cheers, guys.